They say silence is harmless until it learns the shape of a person and settles into the spaces they leave behind. My house learned my husband's shape, his rough laughter, the creak of his boots, the quiet apology in his eyes when words failed him. And once the echoes faded, it turned mean in the quiet way only old houses know. It kept my breath shallow, kept my steps light, as if I were a guest overstaying a welcome that had already slipped out the door with him one winter morning. My name is Eliza, and I am 54 years old, with hands that remember gardens and shoulders that remember grief. The town at the edge of the lake keeps its secrets tidy, white fences clipped to attention, shutters painted the color of patience, and no one asks more than they want to know. After Nathan died, I taped my life along the seams. Tea at dawn, pruning shears by noon, a chair by the west window where the sun comes in tired and gold. It wasn't a life as much as it was a narrow hallway I kept walking down because the door at the end refused to open. On a Monday wrung out by rain, a stranger came to my porch with a soaked pack, a long coat hemmed in mud, and eyes the quiet green of lake water about to turn. He was not a stranger to my history, though. He was Owen, the son of Nathan's sister, the boy who once chased moths in our backyard and gave them funerals under bottle caps. He had left town years ago with a camera and impatience and stories spilling out of him like coins in a broken pocket. Now he asked if he could stay a little while, just until the weather let the roads remember where they were going. Of course, I said, though something in me braced like a door. He, not a boy now, but a man with storm in his posture, brought the outside in. Wet cedar, the smell of travel, a soft clatter of unknown routines. He slept in the room that used to be Nathan's office, where the bookshelves still knew his hand and the desk still carried the weight of his endings. For the first day, Owen moved around like someone in a museum, respectful, careful not to smudge the glass. Then the house cleared its throat. He began mending things that had been broken so long they'd become part of the decor. The screen door that yelped each time it opened, the loose board on the stairs that confessed to every midnight cup of tea, the garden gate that leaned drunkenly into the roses. He worked with patience, whistling sometimes, a low tune I didn't know, and I realized my heartbeat was keeping time with it. We spoke in small sips at first, strangers wearing old names. He asked about the town, about the lake trail, about the old bakery where the sign still reads crullers like it's announcing a holiday, and I answered like a map slowly unfolding. He cooked once soup that tasted like memory and time, and he laughed like someone who still believed in the useful mercy of sound. He had a camera still, black, scuffed, loyal, and sometimes I'd catch him stealing a picture of the light on the floorboards or the look on my face when I forgot to wear it. On the fourth evening, right after the sky split into tangerine and rust, he asked if I wanted to go to the lake. The path was curled by wind and winter, the reeds listing toward each other like old men sharing secrets. We stood quiet as the water practiced being still. A place like this keeps its grief, he said softly, puts it under glass so it doesn't startle the neighbors. I looked at him long enough to recognize the weight between his ribs. You carrying something? I asked. He nodded, eyes on the water. A year's worth of almosts, he said, and one goodbye I didn't give that won't stop knocking. When we walked back, I found I was breathing deeper than the house had allowed in months. The porch light, timed to kindness, winked on as we climbed the steps, and for a moment I thought the house exhaled too. Grief had taught me the art of polite scarcity, how to fold myself small, how to leave rooms before anyone asked me to stay. Owen didn't ask me to stay. He stayed, long enough that the kettle learned his name and the floorboards learned his gait. He took over the repairs I had been meaning to learn, and in exchange, I taught him the names of the roses and how to coax life from a soil that believed in miracles only if they arrived with their own tools. We formed a rhythm. He mended, I planted. He photographed, I arranged the cuttings on windowsills like bright punctuation to sentences I could not say. Once, while I was reaching for a spool of twine in the shed, his hand brushed mine, and the air snapped like a wire. We both stilled, the moment poised and trembling, something alive picking its head up and asking if it was safe to run. At night, I would walk the house like a penitent. I'd pause in the doorway of his borrowed room, listening to the slow turn of pages, the occasional shutter click catching the way moonlight poured itself across the desk. He was careful with the space between us, as if he understood the humility of an echo. Every now and then, he'd say something that reached inside me with ungloved hands. You look like the part of the day when the chores are done and the light softens, he said once, not looking at me, and I took that into my chest like a holy thing and tried not to worship it. He found an old box in the attic labeled Later, which felt like a joke the past had told at my expense. Inside were photographs from decades ago, Nathan and me brittle with youth, my hair carrying a wind I don't remember, my mouth open in laughter I hadn't yet learned to ration. Owen sifted through with reverence. He paused at one where I was standing barefoot on the dock, jeans rolled, shirt knotted, squinting at the horizon like it owed me answers. Not just beautiful, he said in a voice that knew its own edges. Hungry. He started bringing me small offerings like the woods had sent him as an envoy. A feather striped like a secret, a stone with a perfect thumbprint hollow, a leaf the color of old gold and apologies. Proof that the world keeps making more world, he'd joke, but there was reverence threaded through it. I found myself setting a place at the table for wonder again. On a Sunday flattened by heat, the power went out. We opened all the windows, invited whatever wind was willing to work. The candles we lit weren't for romance. They were for seeing, for not stumbling over the furniture of a life in the dark. He sat on the floor, back against the couch, shirt sticking to his shoulders. I sat at his feet with a bowl of peaches sweating in my lap. I sliced one, handed him a crescent, and the juice ran down his wrist. Without thinking, I leaned forward and caught it with my thumb, his breath caught like a net. Tell me to stop, he said, and it wasn't a threat so much as a prayer. I didn't. The first kiss was not a storm, it was a door opening. It was the house remembering how to inhale. It was the way his hand framed my jaw like a question that finally got an answer. When we pulled apart, the world did not clap or fall to its knees. Somewhere, a moth hit a lampshade, and the neighbor's dog barked at nothing with religious conviction. But my pulse had learned a new language, and I was fluent in an instant. After that, the air wore our names. Our days were not an affair so much as a study in nearness. The brush of shoulders while washing dishes, the longer reach to hand him a wrench, the shared breath at the window when the storm rehearsed at the horizon. He took photographs of small pieces of me, a knuckle, the soft place at the base of my throat, the graying at my temple, and he showed them back to me like evidence that time could be a devotion and not a thief. He told me stories of the cities that had chewed him up gentle and spit him out with a camera full of strangers' windows. I told him about the way grief rearranged the furniture inside me without asking, and how sometimes I still reached for a voice that no longer lived in the next room. He listened the way a person listens when their own silence is heavy. We did not talk about staying. We did not talk about what this made us. We did not name the thing that walked alongside us, though we fed it, sheltered it, and watched it grow bold enough to nap in the afternoon sunlight. The first shadow landed on a Tuesday when the mail arrived like a verdict. An envelope addressed to Owen wore a return label from a gallery 2 states away. Inside was an invitation to show his work, the kind of invitation that dropped a ladder down a future and dared him to climb. He held it like it might bite. "It's what I left for," he said, and the words had more apology than triumph. "I know," I murmured, because I did. "I have always respected the way roads ask for you. But knowing and wanting sit at different tables and eat different meals, and they are not often introduced." We tried to fit the news into our days like it belonged there. He kept fixing small things as if mending could outpace leaving. I kept planting as if roots could be bribes. He took me to the old rail bridge where the weeds had decided they were in charge and asked me to stand with my back to the world while he photographed the curve of my spine against the ruin. "There," he said quietly, looking through the viewfinder. "That's the thing, that's the leaving and the staying arguing in the same body." At night, the house returned to its old tricks, hoarding silence, showing me the rooms where endings practice. I found him in the kitchen at 2 a.m., elbows on the table, that invitation a small, sharp sky in front of him. "If I go," he said, "I'm afraid I'm choosing the life where you aren't in it. If you stay," I said, "I'm afraid you'll resent the life where I am." We did not touch then. We let the truth sit between us and burn a little. 2 days later, my sister arrived unannounced, bearing muffins and the kind of concern that wears lipstick. She looked at Owen like she would at a storm front, assessing distance, speed, probable damage. After he'd gone to the shed to pretend a rake needed rescuing, she turned to me. "Eliza," she said, "what are you doing?" "Breathing," I said, and it sounded both like confession and defense. She sighed, softened. "Then breathe," she said, "but don't drown." The last week folded itself into small mercies. We drove to the far orchard and picked cherries like thieves. We swam in the lake and came up laughing, surprised at our own buoyancy. He taught me to look through his lens, how framing doesn't change the truth, only the way the truth gets to you. I taught him to bake the braided bread my mother called luck, and we ate it warm with butter and greed. The night before he left, we sat on the back steps and listened to the field crickets tune the dark. "You made me remember myself," he said, and it was both blessing and benediction. I touched his cheek and let my hand stay. "You made me remember there was more to remember," I answered. We did not say goodbye that night. We said see you in the morning. and we meant the morning after that, and the morning after that one too, and all the mornings we do not get to keep. The day he left, the house tried to behave. The kettle sang at the right pitch. The clock remembered its job. The sun put its hand through the kitchen window and patted the table like it always had. He stood in the hallway with his pack on and the strength of his choices standing with him, and when he finally looked at me, the green in his eyes had learned a new shore. I have to go, he said, and there was tenderness in the surrender. This can't keep not the way it is. Then go, I said, because love, the real kind, is not a chain but a door held open. He stepped forward, cupped my face like the first warm day of spring, and kissed me. No future in it, no past either, just a kiss with our names on it and the moment it belonged to. Thank you, he whispered against my forehead, for returning me to myself. When the door closed, the house did not collapse. It tilted maybe, the way a field does after the wind finishes its say. For a while I walked the rooms like the echo of a bell. The light found the old corners. The floor remembered my weight. I made tea. I watered the roses. I took the camera he'd left me, deliberately, I think, and went to the lake. I stood on the dock in the hush between day and whatever comes next, and I turned the lens on the water. The first picture I took was out of focus and honest. The second caught the line where dark ends and dawn auditions. The third was of my own hand on the rail, veins like small rivers, knuckles like landmarks, and I thought, here I am. Not the version that waited, not the one that hid, not the ghost of the woman the town politely nodded around. Here, the house, apparently tired of pretending, loosened. I opened windows I hadn't in years. I moved the furniture like a revelation. I painted the kitchen the blue of clean mornings. I sent kind replies to people who wanted to set me up with their brother's friend or their friend's brother and said no without apologizing. I did not stop missing him. I did not stop being grateful that missing him meant something had been worth carrying. Summer stepped into itself. The roses performed their old miracle. I made bread and gave half to the neighbor with the barky dog, who stopped barking at ghosts and started barking at squirrels with purpose. I taught a girl from town how to braid bread and how to deadhead roses and how to say no like a door that loves you. I took pictures of the way evenings land. I sent one to an address he had given me, no note. Weeks later, a postcard arrived with 3 words, still making more. They say the greatest loves are the ones that last, but I think the tender ones, the ones that arrive like rain on a day you've forgotten what rain is for, are the ones that rebuild you quietly from the inside out. Owen did not fix me. I was never broken. He did something kinder. He reminded me I still had a pulse that wasn't only about survival. He left me with a camera and a window and the permission to take up my own light. One evening, just before the sun decided to be reasonable about leaving, I stood on the porch and felt the entire house shiver and settle like a body exhaling. Not emptiness, space, not an ending, an opening. Sometimes the love that doesn't stay is the love that hands you the keys to a room you built and forgot you owned. Sometimes learning to live again is the truest kind of forever.